Well, we have established that we are individualistic and superior. No, think we're superior. Of course, we may be right on some things, but no. Okay. Third category is equality. Americans emphasize that all people deserve respect and should be treated equally. But we don't really mean equally in every respect. Americans tend to have conversations with waiters in restaurants. Now you may think, well, why not? But there's some places that don't. Because a waiter in some places is a worker. They're just doing what they're supposed to do. They're just like part of the machinery. You don't talk to them any more than you talk to the candle bearer, at least in conversation. But Americans, they see a waiter as a real person who's there. In fact, waiters will come up and say, "Hello, my name is Frank. I will be your waiter today." That doesn't strike us as unusual, right? Some places it would. It's like, I don't care what your name is. What do you introduce yourself? I just want my steak. You know? We say thank you and please to waiters and to clerks and bank tellers and servers in general, right? Generally. People who are not rude, they say please and thank you. Some cultures you don't say please and thank you that much. Don't even think of it. And the waiter doesn't expect it because they're just doing what they're supposed to do. And so you don't thank them because they're just supposed to do it anyway. But Americans have, since we have the concept of equality, we think of the waiter. It's hard for us to treat people in an impersonal way. And so we take an interest in them at least a little bit. It might be superficial. It might not be that we really care that much about what they're going through, but we do at least recognize them as a real person, not a machine. And we look down on somebody who gets rude with a waiter. You know, somebody who acts rudely in a checkout line or whatever. We look down on that. There are people who do it, but we look down on that because we expect that people should be treated with respect. Americans usually stand in line to wait for service in the order that they arrive. Okay, and I think, well, what other way is there to do it? But they don't do that in a lot of countries. They don't stand in line. Anybody here from a country where they don't typically stand in line? Yes.
I'm from Kentucky.
They don't stand in line in Kentucky?
Some of them do, but
Okay.
some of them is just like, right, who's next? I am, even though they just entered.
Okay.
So,
Okay. A person like that would be resented, though, right?
but then we just kind of just,
Okay.
but even though we're like, I can't believe you just did that, we've been waiting for about 10 minutes.
Okay. So it's still not really culturally acceptable, even there, even in Kentucky. My wife's parents are from Kentucky. The concept of standing in line, what does that mean? Why do we do that? And why would some places not do it? First of all, why do we do it? Because the reason people don't do it, there are at least two different reasons that are different. They're not the same. Why people wouldn't. But why do we stand in line?
For respect, and it's in order. Like, it's orderly fashion.
Okay.
The reason.
Right. So it's an equality thing in a sense. So even if the person who came in later is more important in some way, has higher status, he does not cut in unless he's in a place where he has privileged status of some kind. So, for example, I spoke at UBC a few days ago, and when the president took me down for lunch in the cafeteria, he took me to the head of the line. We cut in. You know, because it wouldn't have seemed appropriate for the president and his guest to just stand at the end of the line and wait till they get up there. But if he'd been at Walmart or somewhere else, it wouldn't matter how important or how rich he was, and we would resent it if we were in line somewhere and a person was able to just cut in just because of some status that he has in the world, you know, he's rich or important or a politician or whatever, we would resent that. We expect that he has to stand in line and take his turn because we're all equal in that way. There's a lot of ways we're not equal. And we do have ways of treating people differently, but not in that. Okay? So, why would some cultures not stand in line? Why would people not do it in some cultures?
They don't want to wait. I don't know.
Well, maybe, although sometimes it's the same cultures that don't put much of a value on time and efficiency that don't stand in line. So, yes.
I think it would be because they understand that people are not equal. We don't have equal ranks, so some people shouldn't be standing in line. Like with age comes, like if an older person is in front of you or behind you, let them go fast and just stuff like that. Or if the person is in a church setting and the person is like a pastor or someone else, you still let them go fast because as much as the equality, there's only equality among like peers or with the same people. Like we're in this, I don't know, I said, well, maybe the same organization, if we're in the same level, it's no, there is no equality in that sense.
Okay. So it's not equality. And it's not, and here we also don't consider all those people to be equal, but we make them equal when it comes to standing in line, for the most part. All right, so that's one reason that people, it's an honor. It's an honor that is given to people of higher status that they're able to go be served earlier. What's another reason that a culture may not stand in line? There's at least one other reason.
Could also be because they don't value the individuality, that like, they go there for the community. So everyone just goes, you know, you can talk to each other while you're standing in a huddle waiting for your food. I don't know.
And so the efficiency is not the higher value.
Yeah.
It's the time together. And if they're planning on eating together anyway, it doesn't matter who gets their food first. And so they're just all there together. I told you the story last semester about at our church, they were serving a meal, and in the line doing the serving, we had a German lady and a black young lady, and they got into a big conflict over how it was being done because the German lady wanted it efficient. Let's get it done. Let's do it right. The young black lady, she was just enjoying being there. We were all together. We're all going to eat together anyway. She wasn't in any hurry. And so they got angry at each other because the German lady thought the other one was lazy. The black girl thought that the other one was bossy. And neither one understood the other one's value. Okay? The German lady's not thinking, okay, Sherry is just doing this because she's relaxed and I just need to calm down. She's just enjoying. That never entered her mind at all. The real reason. And Sherry didn't think of Monica, well, she's trying to get this done so people can get their food and go sit down. That never entered her mind. And so she had to think of another reason why Monica might be doing that. And the only reason she could think of was that Monica just wanted to be bossy and be in charge. And so they imputed the wrong motives to each other. Got angry, yes.
Could it have to do with privacy and personal space, respecting each other's personal space? Because Americans don't like to touch each other, so it's just easier to stand in line than to all be shoving and pushing, and that just makes them very uncomfortable.
Yeah, and undefined. See, because like when you're standing just in a cluster, and anybody might get served next, there's a randomness about that. And it also causes interaction among them which they may not want. You know, they don't want to talk to other people that are on an elevator. They don't want to talk to other people that are in line that much. So when it's nice in line. In fact, I've noticed more and more people give each other privacy when they go to the service person. So like in the post office, you know, here's a guy up there buying his stamps, and the next person in line is standing 10 feet back. Like this guy needs all this privacy, you know, buying his stamps. I mean, who cares, you know? And so here we are, we're all in this little post office, we're all crammed back here by the door because the second guy in line is 10 or 12 feet back from the guy who's getting the stamps, you know? We've got to wait all back there. But it is a privacy thing. It's like, okay, let him do his deal. You know, he doesn't want anybody up there breathing over his shoulder, or especially making them think that we're trying to make them hurry, you know? Okay? So, A reason, so several good reasons here that are coming in. One is that efficiency is not necessarily as valued as well, and especially not as valued as some other things. So where an American might be saying, how can we run a certain number of people through a certain amount of time and get this done? The others, they're not even thinking of that. Let's just do it, and however long it takes is however long it takes, and what's it matter? And sometimes it doesn't matter, sometimes it does.
Also, see if this theory fits. Americans think that people who work hard need to be rewarded for their hard work. So if you equate standing in line a long time as working hard, then they need to get the reward of getting served first. If that paradigm is true, is that not in other countries about the value of working hard, getting the result?
I don't think they would see it that way as much. They would see getting the food as a privilege, and if you're there, you're going to get it. They would honor some people by letting them skip the line, and the others are just, they're blessed and privileged that they're able to be there at all, you know. And in some places, they would just maintain the minimum of order to just make sure it doesn't turn into chaos, you know, because you don't want to be mobbed, you know, the food servers. But things that we would take for granted, I remember being in a seminary up in northern Indiana, and there was a guy, and I can't remember for sure which country he was from. It might have been Ukraine. But I remember him talking about, he said, I went down to the cafeteria, and I saw people standing in a line, and so I didn't go to the front. I went back to the end of the line. And the professor was complimenting him, said, that's good, you're noticing that. Because evidently he'd had some trouble with that in the past. You know, they're serving the food up there, so he just went up to where they were serving the food, you know. That's where he was wanting to go, so, and he didn't even think about the line. I mean, we would think, how can anybody not think of that? I mean, you see this line of people waiting, and what are they going to think if you get in front of them? Didn't even occur to him. Okay. So in other cultures, it is expected that the more important people waiting for service will be served first. Americans are uncomfortable with overt displays of respect or favoritism. We don't like some kinds of favoritism, especially shown to somebody else. And we can be a little bit embarrassed even if it's shown to us. So, for example, a person who is taken to the head of the line might feel a little bit uncomfortable about it. Right? What would you do if, say, you're standing in line down there at the cafeteria, and somebody in charge comes along and says, "Oh, here, come on," and they take you to the front and they put you in? What are you going to think? You're going to be looking to see what the reactions are of other people. You might even make some apologetic statement, you know, sorry, because we're a little bit uncomfortable with some signs of respect. And some of the respect that would be shown in some cultures, like bowing. You know, if somebody came to us and shaking their hand and bowing and just really showing, which to them would be just normal respect, to us we're like, whoa, what's this guy doing? What's bowing to me for? You know, you feel a little bit uncomfortable with that. We show our levels, our respect in a little bit more subtle ways. Yes.
I think that could also go with names. Like, I work at a daycare, and I don't like the kids calling me by my last name. Because that's my mother. That's not me. That's my mom. So I think there are various little ways to do that, and we don't like it.
But there are some things we expect too. And there's some things that I saw in the book that I had never thought of. I was looking for it in my notes. Maybe I didn't put it in my notes. But I remember what some of them were. They, in a group of people of various status levels, especially if a discussion is going on or a decision is being made, the higher status person is more likely to talk first and will tend to talk the most and may have the last word as well. And others defer to him or her on that. Another thing I noticed, it said that the higher status person is more likely to touch the lower status person than the other way around. I had never thought of that, but I think it's true. So the person who pats the other one on the shoulder, for example, is more likely to be the higher status person. Why do you think that is?
Because we're afraid to kind of step the boundaries of reaching out to the higher standard of
Okay.
people because they're more of authority. So you don't
Okay.
feel uncomfortable to even just like,
You don't know for sure if you'd be welcome to.
yeah, exactly.
And so it's up to them to set the level.
Right.
Okay? I think that's mostly it. I think that's the main reason. And you've observed this, right? Have you guys observed this? A higher status person can treat the lower status person with more informality, more casually. Brother Avery sometimes, when he sees me, he'll say, "Hi, Steve." And I don't say, "Hi, Mike." Maybe it would be fine. I don't know. Maybe it would. I don't know. I haven't tried it. But I know he's just trying to be friendly, and the higher status person can set the tone or set the level. And some of those things the lower person can reciprocate. In other words, they say, "Okay, he did that, so I can do the same." Other things you can't. You can't necessarily reciprocate. So, for example, just because your boss comes by and pats you on the shoulder and says, "Hey, you're doing a good job," doesn't mean that you could do that with him the next day. Okay? Maybe you could, maybe not. You know. So, anyway, there's all kinds of illustrations coming to my mind here. Anybody have anything you want to say on this? Yes.
This is a little bit earlier, but I think it's really interesting that with this culture so much based on competition and individual achievement, we still don't like some forms of respect given to us as individuals. Like we might take awards and things and feel very proud about that, but if somebody comes bowing to us, then we find that very comfortable and disconcerting. Do you think that has to do somewhat with our belief that we have to earn respect or earn our achievements, and we don't like it if we don't feel like we've done anything, like we're just the same as all the other people in line, and yet the president brings us up to the front?
Well, it's partly that. It's also the idea that achievement does not necessarily make you a better person in all areas. So, for example, if you were the best player on the basketball team, and so from then on, you had your choice of the seats every time you came into class. There's something about that would seem inappropriate. It's like it's unrelated, okay? I was the greatest at this one thing, and we accept a trophy or whatever in commendations, and we don't mind being mentioned as being the best player in that, even in the future, being mentioned in that context. But then for everybody to start treating you with a different kind of respect from then on in every area doesn't seem right to us, because we know we're not somehow a special person in every area because of that. In other cultures, it's not necessarily that way. A person could be treated because if he's achieved a certain status, he could be treated with that respect in every area. Yes, sir.
I think another thing that it could be the cause of that, of people not wanting to respect, is other people resenting you for that position too. I think that has a lot to do in America because people are so competitive. You know, so you get picked for like a leadership position or something, and then other people have, you know, negative feelings about that because they have a different perception of you. And I think
Yeah.
a lot of people in America now are a lot more self-conscious.
And we appreciate a person who has been honored. We appreciate him if he still acts like he's a normal guy. You know what I mean? He'll still talk to his friends. If he started acting like he wanted his friends to treat him, I told my wife some time back, I said, "I think that you ought to start calling me Dr. Gibson when we're around people." And it would increase my level of respect. Of course, she won't do it. I was joking anyway. But But what would we think of a person who really did insist on that? You know, insisted to be being treated as a special person, even by his friends. I mean, we don't appreciate it. It's just gross.
On like the way you're saying that, could it mean like could it be it's not really the individual that feels awkward being put up there? It's the idea that because Americans want equality, they would accept anyone else, regardless of their rank, to be treated special. Could it be just it's everyone else, and even if someone did deserve it, some people would still feel like they could also be up there or something like that.
Well, some would resent it, and so the person even being honored is conscious of that. He knows they're not going to like it, and so they make an effort then to be normal, to try to fit in. You know, we don't want people to resent us for the way we're being treated. So it's a happening on both sides. So there are perceptions, though, that are different. Though. Do we really treat everybody equally? When I was in college years and years ago, I remember some of us did a little experiment a couple different times, going into the mall dressed up in a suit compared to going in blue jeans. And I've had chances to notice the difference in that plenty of times since then, especially as you get a little older. You don't look like a kid as much. There's a big difference between the way a person in a suit gets treated from the way a person who's in casual, or especially in clothes that are even less than casual. They're not treated the same. And in working in the inner city, I observed enough that I resolved that if I ever become homeless and have to survive on the street, I hope it never happens, but if I do, I'm going to try to keep at least one outfit of clothes clean and in very good condition. Even if I'm sleeping under a bridge or whatever, I'm going to try to keep, because I've seen what happens. Homeless people are immediately recognized, many of them. Now some maybe are doing that, and so they're not as recognizable, but many are immediately recognized. And after I've pastored in the inner city for 5 years, somebody tells me they're homeless, a lot of times I can tell whether they really are or not. And there's a mark of, many times they're not able to keep themselves very neat. And so they are treated differently. They hang out in libraries or other places. They go into public places to use the restrooms. They ask for services. They may go into McDonald's and ask for a cup of water. And so McDonald's in the inner city in Indianapolis, they charge for water. No other McDonald's does, but in the one place where people are coming in there and asking for it without buying anything, they charge. Because they resent homeless people or poor people coming in and just getting water. So people are not treated the same. They'll be given the minimum of courtesy and respect. So in other words, if this homeless person gets in a line somewhere at the library or wherever, he will get the basic level, the minimal level of respect and courtesy and service that everybody is supposed to get, but he won't get anything extra. Whereas another person who is friendly and has a better appearance, they may become very helpful. They may do, and really it's in your advantage to become the kind of person that people like to help. Be very appreciative. This is something you do with cultural diversity. But appreciate them, show, courtesy, and if the person providing the service is not cheerful and they're grouchy and so on, show sympathy, and it's amazing how they warm up and brighten up, and they will do anything to help make you happy because you appreciated them and made their day better. That's a lot better than getting up there and complaining because they're not doing a good job. So, but anyway, people are not treated the same. All right? So, if a person comes up to me and says, you know what, I've got this emergency. My car's broken down here, and my mother is in Greenfield. She just had a heart attack, and she's been taken to the hospital, and I need $5 of gas so I can put in my car so I can get there. Okay, that's his story. All right, how am I going to respond to him? Well, to be honest, his appearance is going to do a lot to affect his credibility. Now, maybe it shouldn't be that way, but the fact is that it is, because there are a lot of people, that's the way they every day they're telling that story all over the place. They're telling that story and getting a couple dollars. And so if he looks like the kind of person who is doing that, then he's not considered to be credible. Now, it's very sad, of course, that it could be true, and maybe somebody wouldn't believe somebody when it is true. But it makes a difference. And so we may say we treat everybody equally, but we don't when it comes to a lot of those practical matters. Right. All right. Equality. Anything else about equality before we go on?
I just wanted to point out that, like, I think that's one of the ways that we can stand out as a Christian is by reaching out to the poor, because Jesus tells us to, like, in the Bible, throughout the Bible, encourages us to reach out to those who are poor. And in our culture, that would really make a difference here when we see a person that is, on the side of the road sleeping, what we would actually go out of our way to do something for that person would make a lot of difference. And just the people around us, like, they might see that and kind of maybe judge us a little bit, but, like, there's a difference in between a Christian and just this, our culture.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Right. And it should be that way. And even the minimum of respect that we consider everybody to be worthy of, a lot of times does not get shown. There are people who are considered below that. So for a while, we had a food pantry in the inner city, and I ran it a couple days a week for a couple hours a day. People would come in and ask for food. And so the whole idea of the pantry, I think there's some problems with it, but that's a different class. But anyway, it's something we did. And people would, I tried to imagine what it would be like to be in that role of having to come and ask for food because you're in that bad of a shape. And so I tried to think how I would feel if I were doing that. And so what I would do is when I had, it was in like a little office, I would, when they came in, say, hey, I was wanting to know if I could get some food. So I'd say, oh, hey, come on in. I'm Pastor Steve. What's your name? And I would act like I was glad to see them, which I wasn't there. Come in, sit down. I'd get acquainted with them. I would ask them some questions, and we would always give food, especially the first time they came, and usually the second. After that, there were some conditions. But I would have this conversation, and as they left, I would thank them for coming, and they left without feeling humiliated, I think. And that I was really glad to meet them. I really was glad to get acquainted with them. And so I think that respect that often is not given to the poor and to the person who is put in the position, that people say beggars can't be choosers. Well, why not? Why can a person be in such bad shape that they really don't have any right to even say what they prefer? And yet a lot of people, they act as if that's the case. That if you're really in that bad shape, you should just take what is offered without any complaint, without offering, mentioning any choice. And maybe they should be willing to do that, but it's not right for us to put them in that position to where it has to be that way. Amen. All right, let's go to the next category. Confidence. We talked about individualism, superiority, equality, and now confidence. Americans are likely to have long-term goals and expect that planning and right choices can fulfill their goals. And again, another of these things you can say, well, wouldn't anybody? No, not necessarily. There are many people who do not make plans, long-term plans, because they do not feel control over their life. They don't feel able to make things happen. They don't see how their choices. I saw this a lot in the inner city, where people come in, they would tell their story. And their story was all about things that had happened to them. Okay? It wasn't about things they had done. They didn't say, well, I couldn't get along with my brother-in-law, and so I got mad one day and hit him, and so they threw me out of the house. They would say, no, the way they would say it is, my brother-in-law was a real jerk, and he just didn't like having me around, and I couldn't take it, and they ended up putting me out of the house. It's all about what happened to them. No clear choices in their story. They had no choice about how I did this and this happened. I did this and this happened. I dropped out of school, didn't graduate, so I can't get a job. I got tattoos all over my face and neck, so they won't hire me even at McDonald's. I have a criminal record, so they won't hire me at any place that handles money. I get mad and yell at people, so they won't put me in any service position. They don't tell you that. It's all about things that have happened to them with no consciousness of choices. Okay? Now, those are extreme cases, but there are also cultures where they don't have a clear concept of choices and that their choices make a difference in their life. They don't expect that they can plan long term. Americans tend to feel that they can control their future to some extent. Now, we know unexpected things happen, but we feel like that we can make choices and control our future to some extent. An American does not want to be defined by his past, but by his present. He might even want to be defined by his future. He says, I'm going to be a doctor. So he wants to be respected already now as a guy who is going to be a doctor. Right? I mean, there's a little bit of status to a person that is going to be a doctor. He's wanting to be defined already by his future. So youth are encouraged to dream big, even unrealistically, to some extent. Little guy says, I want to be a football player. And you can see that he's never going to weigh more than 150 pounds. Nobody says, look, dude, you're not ever going to be a football player. You're going to have to do something else. For the most part, we don't. Or we would really frown on somebody who would do that. Youth are encouraged to dream big, even if it's unrealistic. And we tend to blame people for the choices that they've made. They can be blamed or credited for their circumstances. So, in other words, we look for a reason why people are in the circumstances they're in. Now, all of this sounds normal to us, right? People are often to blame or to be credited for the circumstances that they're in. Okay, but that is something that is not unique with our culture, but it does distinguish us from a lot of cultures. Any comments about confidence? Do you see where this would be relevant in doing ministry somewhere? Why it might be a little bit hard to motivate some people who don't know, who don't believe that they can accomplish something, who don't make any long-term goals. They don't plan beyond tomorrow, in many cases, because things are out of their control.
Actually, I just wanted to make a comment on like what you said earlier in the class was that we are defined by the relationships that we develop with other people. Or, I mean, if other people want us to be successful, then we'll probably be successful and we're more likely to be successful as long as we have that support. But if people do not want us to be successful, then we're probably not going to be. So how does that play into this concept of our confidence?
Well, Americans tend to underestimate how important these things are. Now, let me revise that just a little bit. I wouldn't say that people wanting you to be successful will make you successful, but it does give you your chance. And the opposite is true, that if there is nobody who wants you to be successful, you probably won't be. You're not going to be given that chance. So those relationships basically set the stage, set your launching pad to where it gives you your chance. Now, as Americans, though, we tend to underestimate that. We undervalue that and take a lot of credit for what we accomplish. So even though that is a fact, the way it actually works, and in some places they emphasize that, it's all group, it's all team accomplishment, and so on, family, whatever. Americans don't emphasize that. We're very much on individual achievement, and we don't give enough credit to those that help us get there in general. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. I was just gonna make a comment. My dad was a business owner, and he, in building his own personal business, starting it from scratch, like most of his business endeavors were actually building relationships with the community and just going and talking to people about what he was going to do. And you would think that that would be a waste of time, and a lot of people thought it was a waste of time, but it ended up actually helping him build a very successful business because people had established a relationship with him
Right.
and created a very successful business in the long term.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the way it works. People like to do business with somebody, not only that they trust, but it helps if they even like them a little bit, and they're easy to work with. All right. Anything else on confidence? We'll go on to the next. Is this something you observe? This is something you won't maybe see as much of until you get into another culture. But I ran into this when I first landed in a staff position in the college in Ukraine, and I had Ukrainians working that I was supposed to direct and motivate. I saw that they had very little expectation of what we could accomplish. I mean, they just didn't have much expectation of what could be done. And I was kept trying to, we can do this, and trying to show them how. And over time, they gained in that, but they came from a culture where everything was under government control. It was oppressive, a bad economy, and just everything, and just not much of a concept that they could really do much to change their life. All right, another category, and this one we could call tact. Tact. Did you know our view of tact is cultural? And there's a lot of differences. Not attack, but tact. T-A-C-T. How do Americans talk about their problems? Especially a problem that they're trying to solve. How do we talk about it? Is that question too vague?
I think our answers are vague. I think what we talk about is vague. Whenever we're explaining the situation, we use as vague of a term as our relationship with that person.
Okay. It depends on what kind of problem. If it's an interpersonal problem, we tend to approach it tactfully and carefully, right? But otherwise, we have a tendency to get to the point pretty well, right? Or not? It's basically if we think there may be some personal issues that somebody is going to be touchy about, we can beat around the bush. We can be very vague about that. But otherwise, when a group sits down to discuss what to do about something, they want to stay right on target, right to the point, get it said, and get it solved. Some cultures that would be considered pushy and disrespectful. And if somebody wants something from you, it may take them a while to tell you what it is they want. So let's imagine an American missionary and a native pastor in a different kind of culture where they are less direct. Okay, the native pastor comes by to visit the missionary. Okay, the missionary comes out, they sit on the front porch, and the native pastor starts talking about his cow had a calf last night, and there's going to be a lot of grass in the field because it's been raining lately. And they just talk about a lot of different things. Now, does that mean he did not have any purpose for coming? That there was nothing specific? No. It just means it's going to take him a little bit to get to it. Okay? Now, is he wasting time? Maybe from some people's perspective he's wasting time. But what he may be doing is simply reestablishing the relationship. He's feeling out the missionary's attitude towards him. If the missionary seems in a hurry, doesn't want to talk to him, the pastor may go on and leave without ever asking for what it was he came to ask. Okay, because he feels like the missionary doesn't want to hear it. So he's renewing the relationship. He's stretching maybe the relationship a little bit to see before he gets to his point.
When I was staying in Guatemala, the missionaries told us that when, specifically, Mr. Rickenbach, male missionary, when he would go to do business in town, he would have to plan extra time and just go in and kind of do small talk and build a relationship with the person, and then kind of suggest what he was wanting done, and then they might be very vague about it, and they'd go on like more things about the weather and completely other things, then he'd bring the conversation back around and do it several times, and he might eventually get what he wanted, but it would just take a lot of conversation, relationship building, and tact.
Yeah. And see, to somebody who's trying to get the job done, that can be frustrating. And yet, maybe something important is happening in that still. And we'll talk about this more later when we get into more in the leadership and where relationship comes in. Because Americans sometimes, even when they do try to put a value on relationship, they only value it because it's the way to get things done. They're not switching from getting things done to relationship. They're just using relationship as the means. Okay, well, I've got to sit and talk to this guy and be friendly and hear about his cow having a calf and all that, because that's the only way I'm going to be able to get him to help me get this project done. Well, the project is still the priority. The relationship is just a means if you do it that way. But what if you really could make the relationship the priority? It would be a different approach. Okay. Somebody else have a hand up? I thought, yes.
I guess growing up, I was always taught that those people were people that you stay away from because they're trying to be manipulative. There's a lot of people in my hometown who are like that. They'll just come up and try to have a casual conversation with you, and eventually you'll catch on that they're wanting something. And so I was always taught that, you just stay away from those people.
Well, there are those kind of people that use it for manipulation. But there are people that you're in a trusted relationship with. That's the way they always do things. There are people that I've worked with for years that if they wanted to talk to me about something they wanted to get done, that's the way they would approach it. They would take time and they're rebuilding the relationship, especially if we haven't seen each other for a while. So here was something that was in the forums. Do Americans argue? Do they like to argue? Some said yes and some said no and gave various comments on that. And there's some good explanation on this, but what do you think? What do you think, Rose? Do Americans like to argue?
I would say it just varies with personality. I can't really generalize it, but they're just same as everyone. The people who like to argue, the people who don't.
Okay. Well, that's a tactful answer.
Americans love to argue as long as they're winning.
Okay.
If they're winning the argument, they love it. And if they're losing, they hate it.
They get frustrated and irritated. Okay.
Well, according to the general characteristics we have, it's individualistic and they're proud of their knowledge. So, by that logic, you would say they like to argue because they want to show that they're right. So they want to be like, oh no, I'm right, and I know the way. You're like, I'm superior.
Okay.
So I will show you how this is to be done.
Okay.
By that logic, you would say they like to argue.
Okay. Are there some things that they will argue about and some things that they won't, though?
So something on the previous point. There's two types of arguing. There's one where people sometimes they attach their identity to their ideas, and when you do that, you have a dangerous combination. Because when someone attacks your ideas, your identity and your person will be hurt. But when you do not necessarily have your identity attached to your ideas, but rather truth, you're open. You don't really care because you want people to enter your life and tell you you are wrong. When you know that, and when you approach an argument or you approach a conversation in that way, you're free because nothing can touch you. Because you're not attached to your ideas, you're attached to the truth. And when that's the case, People might say that you are argumentative or you're opinionated. No, it's just truth is truth. I have no attachment to it whatsoever. I mean, if you base your essence and person inside of you on the basis of your ideas, you're going to get in trouble all the time.
Mhm.
And most people do that. But you have to get to a point where, you know, it doesn't matter. I'm following what is the truth. And you know what? Sometimes it's going to hurt, but I'm going to follow it nonetheless.
Mhm.
So,
Okay, so you're saying that a person's ideas can be evaluated and tested, refuted even, without necessarily being taken as an attack on that
yeah,
person.
yeah, exactly. And I've trouble because sometimes I don't necessarily. I go after a person's ideas, but then when they're attached to the person, I'm actually attacking the person.
Mhm.
And I have to remember that a lot of times people are like that. I have to show deference to that as well.
Yeah, a lot of people are that way. They don't make that distinction. I just had a conversation last week with a woman I've known, worked with her a little bit. She runs an organization that we work with some. And she doesn't like to have conversations with me. And I tried to figure out why that was. And finally, she said, well, I just think you're very firm in everything you think, and it's your way or the highway. And whoa, I'm not that way. I try.
Yeah, exactly.
And she's very liberal. She's liberal in every way. She's liberal religiously. She's liberal politically. She voted for Obama. And I'd like to have some conversations with her. What in the world is in her head, you know? But she gets very defensive about anything like that.
Yeah.
And so I think I made a little progress in that conversation. I told her she was the best-hearted liberal that I had ever known, and that I would just like to. I think she's sincere, and I'd like to see how she thinks, you know. But I made a note to myself to be very careful not to appear challenging in my conversations with her, because she doesn't feel comfortable trying to defend
Use
her
questions
views.
with those kind of people. Use questions all the time. Questions.
Well, yeah, except now I've already done too much the other way, and so even a question, she thinks I'm setting her up to refute what she says, and so I should have started being careful a long
We're devious.
a long time ago. Yeah, so we'll see. We'll work on it. Yes.
Kind of related to what Jonathan said, I think when arguments involve emotion, Americans try to shy away from them. Like, and that would come along with your ideas being part of your identity, and so you feel attacked. And when there's passionate, emotional responses, we get scared that, I don't know, maybe the relationship's going to be broken up or something.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I know for me personally, I like to debate with people, but when it gets emotional, then I'm just like, get me out of here.
Yeah. So a couple things have been said so far on why people might shy away. One is their opinions are very personal, and so they take it as an attack on themselves. Another would be they don't want to damage the relationship. They don't want to feel like somebody became an antagonist. A lot of times people will argue about insignificant things, but they won't argue about important things because that gets too personal. So they'll argue about a sports team or something. And the author talked about this, and I don't know, it's a big subject and it's another thing that's changing in America. A lot of people do not welcome argument. They don't welcome you to change their mind on anything. They don't want you to try to change their mind. That's intolerant if you think that they should think what you think. Okay? That's a lot of thinks in one sentence. But they don't want you to make, if you say, you know, I know this is true and you ought to think this, like, whoa, how can you tell me what I ought to think? You know, that's intolerant, okay? Well, that's ridiculous because it's saying that you have the right, you have the freedom to think, but you don't have the freedom to come to a conclusion. You know, that's not freedom to think if you can't come to a conclusion and think that it's right, you know, and try to help other people come to the same conclusion. That's not freedom to think. Freedom to think is freedom to persuade, but they want freedom to think without freedom to persuade. But anyway, that's too big a topic to try to cover in here. Tact. Still talk about tact. Financial privacy. Americans do not like to be asked how much they get paid. Okay? Is that something we take for granted, right? We don't ask people how much they get paid. That is different in some cultures. we don't like to be asked how much we paid for something. Now, sometimes we may volunteer the information if a person is kind of proud of how much they paid for something. I paid, $190 for this pair of shoes. Yes.
I used to work at a corporation of Ace Hardware for about 2 years, and I noticed a trend where in the handbook, if you talked about how much you got paid within a coworker, you were terminated instantly. And so I wonder if enough companies that people work for create that culture environment where you don't talk about how much you pay for something or what you get paid, because you lose privileges and lose jobs quickly. Could that have any...
Well, it's because of the privacy that people want.
Okay.
And especially because of the, they don't want to have to try to explain why somebody's getting more than somebody else. And there are people that resent it. If they know somebody's getting more than they're getting, they resent that. And that's why that's one reason we're very private. Where in some cultures, it's very common for a person who, I remember our PR guy in the college in Ukraine. He was surprised at this aspect. I mentioned it to him once, and he said, well, it'd be very common for me, say, if I met the PR guy of another college, to ask him how much he's getting paid and tell him how much I'm getting paid. Just compare notes. But it'd be very common for them. That would not be common here at all. It would be a sensitive thing.
So would you say that that is a fruit or the root of
what companies are doing?
Yeah.
I would say it's the root.
So,
Yeah.
So what companies are doing is setting the culture, or the culture setting that in the company?
The culture is setting it. Companies are following it. Because the other kind of companies, it's very common what people are getting paid. It's common knowledge because it's something that they're glad for you to know.
Yeah.
And so if one person's getting paid more than another, that's part of their status. And so it's a well-known thing. Now, what we do in America is we flaunt emblems of status in other ways, financial success. So a person may wear a Rolex watch or drive a real fancy car or whatever. But they don't want people to know exactly what they make, but if it's a lot, they want people to know it's a lot. They might want people to think it's more than what it really is. A lot of people will dress in ways and do things that make them appear that they are much more prosperous than they really are. People don't like to be asked what they paid for something. Again, and I remember sometimes when I've been asked, how much did you pay for that in other countries? And it always kind of startled me a little bit because I wasn't used to that question, and I didn't really want to answer it, especially if I thought that they would think it was a huge amount of money and I was embarrassed to tell them how much I'd spent on it, or if I thought that they would think I could have got a better deal and look down on me because I didn't get a good deal. So it's a private thing. Americans on weight. Americans do not like to be told that they have gained weight. Right? You might think, well, why would anybody want to be told that? But there are countries where gaining weight is a positive thing. They really are. Being heavy, even, is a positive thing. It's a sign of prosperity. It's a sign of health. Americans do not mind being told that they've lost weight, even if they are underweight. Okay? Even if a person has been sick and lost weight because they were sick, they don't really mind people noticing that they lost weight, because that's not generally that much of a negative thing. Unless, if they're dying of a disease or something, obviously that kind of goes with the overall sad picture. But otherwise, for the most part, a person doesn't mind being told they've lost weight. In other cultures, you tell somebody they're thin, it may not be a compliment at all. It may be like saying they're poor, or they can't take care of themselves, that they've gotten thin.
And it's also acceptable in some countries to ask women how much they weigh and talk about it openly, whereas here it's not.
I remember last semester there was a girl who posted in her introduction that she likes to eat. And I remember somebody commenting on that they were a little bit, that was funny that she said she likes to eat. She's not in the class now. It doesn't matter if you know figure out who she was. I'm just pointing that out as a cultural difference. Not very many girls in America would put that in their introduction that they like to eat, right? Not very many would, but they like to eat. Especially especially if they're a little bit heavy. They're not going to talk about like and eat. Now she's not, but if a person's a little, if a girl's a little bit heavy, there is no way she would put in her introduction that she likes to eat. She'd be embarrassed by that fact, right? She doesn't want anybody to talk about that either. No. In contrast to that, that is an open subject in some countries. And in Haiti, that we had a woman that was there, an American woman that was there for a little while who was somewhat heavy, and it was very common for people to ask her about it, talk to her about her being heavy, ask her if she eats a lot, ask her why she's so heavy, stuff like that. That was an open subject for her. Fortunately, she took it in good humor, no problem. Okay. Americans in conversation typically speak only a few sentences before stopping and letting someone else speak. One illustration that's been used is it's kind of like some people playing with a ball, and you catch the ball and then you throw it to somebody else. So you don't keep the ball. Okay? Just like in basketball, team members resent a person who gets the ball and never passes it, hangs on to it until he either loses or gets a chance to make the shot. Team members resent that. We also resent a person who in conversation starts talking and doesn't give anybody else a chance to say much. Okay? There are cultures where that's not the case, and sometimes foreigners visiting don't understand that flow of the conversation, how it's supposed to keep moving. Don't take too long to talk before you stop and let somebody else.
I have a question.
Okay.
You say that Americans have individual, like they're individualists. Yeah, that one. And so it makes no sense how they would resent the person having the ball constantly, because it should be like everyone is trying to look good. So why resent the person with the ball all the time, never letting anyone play?
That's an interesting thought.
Could that have to do with the equality of Americans?
Yeah, they would resent him thinking that he can have it and keep it. Another is they all feel that tendency. In other words, every player would like to be the one who has the ball. And so they expect each other to limit that tendency. So in other words, if when I get the ball, I'm going to do something with it, I'm not going to hog it. That's the expression, ball hog. You know, I'm not going to hog it, and so I don't want the other guy to do that either. Okay, so I'm going to resist that temptation, and you expect the others to resist that temptation, and if they don't resist it, then you resent them hogging the ball. So it's partly because of the individualism that we realize we all have that tendency. Everybody wants to be the star, make the points, but there's something that we admire about a person who will give somebody else a chance. So say a person, he's got the ball, he wants to shoot, but he doesn't really have a good chance to shoot. Here's one of his teammates over here who would have a chance to shoot. So if he'll throw it over to there and he makes the score, we admire not just the guy who made the shot, but the guy who set him up to make the shot. And even because he didn't hog it and just try to be the star. Whereas if this guy, you know, there's three people on him, you know, they're all over him, and he just anyway tries, just charges in there, and he's going to try, and they wham it down, and everybody's saying, "Why'd he do that? Why'd he do that? You know, that was stupid." But he wanted to make the point, but he lost the game. He lost the ball for his team. So we expect individualism to be under control. You know, a person to use good judgment, and especially now if he tries that and succeeds, then he's not resented as much if he scores. But if he tries it and fails, you know, there's a balance there. You know, we admire somebody who tries something great and succeeds at it, but if he tries it and fails, we think he was stupid for trying. Did you have your hand up?
I was just going to say, like, sort of the same thing. Like, we don't like tyrants or like monarchy, like one person just having all the control. Like, even though we do really value individualism, like she said, we like equality, like everybody, whatever. Like, we don't want one person just, yes, they have all the power, they have all the whatever.
Right.
We all need it too.
Right. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
So do you think we appreciate individualism only in context of equality. Like if everybody has the same kind of chance to succeed, then it's okay if somebody does succeed and we respect that. But if there's not the same equality or chance to succeed and somebody dominates and succeeds without other people having the same chances, we don't respect that as much.
That's good. Right, we resent it if somebody has opportunities that others don't have. Yeah. So if he succeeded but he had all these advantages that he didn't earn, we resent that. And that's not different from the individualism, it's part of it in a way, because we think that everybody should get the same chances. Although in reality, people don't all get the same chances. I mean, there's just no way they do. We are all in different circumstances. You're born in different kinds of families. You have different amounts of money that you start out life with. I mean, there's just all kinds. Nobody really gets the same advantage, but we think that as much as possible, the playing field should be level, should be fair. All right. American men do not talk much about their feelings. You agree with that? Unless they're sick. If they're sick, an American man wants to be taken care of when he's sick. Right? But otherwise, I mean, he wants to be tough, you know. But he also wants to allow sympathy when he's sick. And otherwise, emotional feelings and so on, we don't talk about our feelings unless we can put it in some kind of a manly context, some kind of a manly slant. A man doesn't mind telling somebody that he got angry or that he felt like doing such and such. That's okay, because that's consistent with manly assertiveness. Okay, to get angry or to feel aggressive, that's okay. But men do not tell things about themselves that are embarrassing. Okay? So here's a man and his wife, they're on their way somewhere and they get lost. And when they get there late. Okay, everybody else is already there. And they go in and the wife feels no embarrassment about it. She's saying, oh, we made a wrong turn and we just drove around and around. And the man is saying, oh, I'm going to choke her. Why doesn't she shut up? Okay? You girls, I don't know if you understand that or not. You guys do, right? Because a man wants to be competent. If he made a mistake and he got lost or whatever, he's not going to tell anybody about it. He's going to cover it up some way. But the woman feels no compulsion to be competent. She doesn't, in that way, she doesn't think about it. To her, it's the relationship. We're all just friends. And it's just funny we got lost and wandered around. Well, the man is not funny at all. Because it means he failed. He didn't succeed in finding the way. That's why men don't want to stop and get directions. Because if they think they know the way, then why should you stop and ask? Okay? If the woman has any doubt, she wants to stop and ask. And she never quite believes her husband when he says he knows the way anyway. She wants to ask somebody else. Everybody else is always an expert instead of her husband. I've been married for a long time. And I know what this is like, and I've observed it too with others. And so a man doesn't want to stop and get directions because he thinks he knows the way, and so he tries it. But then if it doesn't work, his wife is saying, see, we should have stopped and got directions. You know? So a guy does not tell when he messed up. He doesn't tell about his mistakes unless it can be told in a way that shows that it wasn't his fault, or in a way that shows that even under those circumstances, he did pretty well. He did as well as could be expected. You know, the odds were against him, and he still did as well as anybody would have expected. He might tell about a failure under those conditions, but if he just totally blew it and didn't handle it and did the wrong thing, did something stupid, he's not going to be telling about it. Even to his friends, even to good friends, he's not going to be telling about it. Any comments on that? You girls, this is good information for you too. Your husband wants to be viewed as competent, except when he's sick. Take care of him when he's sick.
Do you think that has more to do with pride than anything else? Because yeah, it's right.
think it would show more that they're weak, and that goes along with incompetence.
You're saying it's pride that they want to be seen as competent, or they resent?
They
Those
resent
stories
not
being
being able
told.
to. They resent not being able to live up to the standards that they're given, possibly.
Standards that they're setting for themselves.
That, and then also what culture dictates.
Okay. I wouldn't too quickly just label it as pride, though, because there's something about the way a man is designed. They know they're the ones that are supposed to take care of things. They're the ones that are supposed to make things happen. And so especially a young man starting out, many times they're not sure if they're able to do that. They don't. I remember a young man that his girlfriend's car wasn't running right, and so she had me look at it. Not that I know much about cars either, but this young man knew nothing about cars. But as I was there, the hood was up, she's standing here, he's standing here. Everything that I was saying, he was affirming. Yeah, I think that's what it is. I think because he was uncomfortable with being pushed out of the circle here in front of his girlfriend and being ignorant in this situation. And so he wanted to appear knowledgeable. And I could have said something totally nonsense and he would have affirmed it. Yeah, that's what it was. So it seemed a little silly to me at the time, and yet I understood what he was feeling. If my wife asks somebody else a question about something that I knew the answer to, I think, why is she asking them? Why is she asking them what kind of water softener we need? I've installed water softeners, but it's like anybody else, their opinion is valuable too, and I think it's just the struggle that a man feels of wanting to be competent, wanting to do his job. I think for a woman, there's something different. Her value is not so much in competence. It's not what she can accomplish. It's more the role in who she is. And she would get very defensive if her role as the wife, mother, whatever, if that were thrown in doubt. Okay? So, for example, if the husband was still depending on his mother for things that he should be depending on his wife for, okay? And she would feel her role threatened, okay? Most of you are not married yet, so you don't know what that would be like, but if he was, and you got to be careful, guys, don't tell your wife, why don't you call my mom and find out how she used to cook this stuff, because now that might not be a bad idea for her to do that, but you better be really careful about suggesting it, because she's trying to fulfill her role, It's not pride. Anything can be wrong. Anything can go wrong. But it's she's wanting to fulfill her role. She's the one now in the home. She's the woman of the house. She's the wife. She's the mother, and she doesn't want somebody else coming in and taking that role. Just like a man doesn't want somebody else to come over and fix it and show him to be incompetent. Or at least it has to be done in a careful way. Now, if he asks for somebody to come and help, that's okay. But don't ask some other guy. Don't ask your dad to come over and fix the car for your husband. He won't appreciate it, even if your dad can do it. You understand what I'm saying? A little bit of marriage counseling before you get there. So, now how much of this is American culture? I don't know how much of this is distinctive American culture. This might be, I would guess that when it comes to men and women on those basic things, that's probably pretty well cross-cultural, I would guess. Any comments, thoughts? Americans don't like to be given too many instructions. Why is that? Too many instructions. More instructions than you need. Why?
They think that they're smart enough to figure it out just by intuitive knowledge and looking at it.
Okay. Now, what if they do know how to do something and somebody is still telling them anyway how to do it? And they resent that. Why?
questions our knowledge. Like,
Okay.
well, consciously, like we think that, well, we know this already, so we don't really need to hear it again. But just being patient with that person because they don't know that you know it, you know. But we get defensive anyway because, oh, we don't need to go through this again because I already know this, and
Right.
you just
Well, and the resentment is not just because it's wasting time or whatever.
yeah,
It's because they're acting like you don't know.
exactly, yeah.
And so, you know, it's like, Dad, you think I'm dumb? You know, that I've got to be told this?
Yeah.
You know? And so we resent too many instructions because they're acting like we don't know anything. You know? There are other cultures that's not that way. They give an abundance of instructions on things that probably, I mean, you would think that the person receiving instructions does already know. You know? I've seen people helping out a driver, you know, telling him things that he already knew, you know. And if I were driving, I would be a little bit irritated if somebody's saying, watch out for that car, watch out for this, turn here, whatever. Okay, I'm driving, I know, I see this, you know. You're sitting in the back and you happen to glance up and see a car and think, I need to be told that it's there when I'm sitting here looking out the windshield the whole time, you know. So Americans resent excessive instructions. It doesn't seem to be that way in all cultures.
I think that like all of us are affected by wanting to be competent, and probably not women as much as men. We don't care as much, but there's certain areas that we care about and feel like I know there's things that I've been incompetent in and felt really bad about it and didn't want to talk about it with except for like close friends or something, because it somehow makes me feel like I'm less worthy or something if people think I'm incompetent in those areas or ignorant or something like that.
Yeah. And when we talk about this, the differences on men and women on this, we've got to be careful not to make it exclusive as if men don't care about their role and women don't care about competence. It's not a 100% thing. It'd be more like a 70-30 thing. Men 70% competence and 30% role, and maybe the other. I'm just picking those numbers, but it's not an exclusive thing, as if. Okay. Yes.
It's very interesting. When I used to work at Ace Hardware, we would try to educate the customer on how to do something. And Ace is very good about putting instructions on the back. So we always take it, flip it over, read through it. You know, they could read through it, we could do it with them. But like if I was helping a husband and wife, the husband would say, yeah, I know. But the wife would say, I love how you guys always refer to the back instructions. I mean, I heard a lot of wives say that. And a lot of times the husband wouldn't accept it, so we wouldn't do it. We don't want to be rude, so he'd walk away. He'd come back an hour later. He did everything wrong. He has to buy all new stuff, just because he refused to read and then he refused to let us do it. But it's also interesting that the gender distinction there too.
Right, and he's less likely to want to hear the instructions if his wife is there.
Right. Yeah.
And he doesn't want her asking you questions that he already knows the answer to, as if he doesn't know. Yeah. You girls, I hope you're all digesting this, right? All right. One more category, I think. Let me look here. Yeah, last category. Friendship. This is last category, friendship. A Ukrainian girl came to GBS years ago. None of you probably knew her. But she made the observation, Americans don't have any friends. Okay? Compared to what she was used to. It didn't seem like Americans had any friends. In Ukraine, friendships were very close. Usually, a Ukrainian would have one very close friend that they share everything with, share life with. They study together, they travel to school together. They just, they're very close friends. She came to America, and not only did she not find a friend like that, to her it didn't look like anybody else had friends like that either. Okay? So here's the kind of thing she saw. For Americans, friendships tend to be compartmentalized. Okay, there are compartments of your life. So you have friends at work, you have friends at school, you have friends in your neighborhood, whatever other settings you go. You might even have a friend at the doctor's office, but those friends never meet each other. and you don't, and they're never in other places. So in other words, the friends at work do not spend leisure time with you. The friend at the doctor's office would be really surprised if you invited her over for supper, and maybe a little bit uncomfortable, because friendships are compartmentalized. You have friends here, and you have friends here, and you have friends here. You don't mix them, and they don't cross those lines. For the most part, there are rare exceptions, but for the most part, they don't cross those lines. And so, in fact, they're not really friends in the general sense. They're like acquaintances that you have friendly interaction with in those contexts. Friends at work do not come to the house. If a person meets a compartmentalized friend at Walmart, what do? Okay, so say there's a lady who works at the library, and when you go to the library, you always stop and chat with her for a minute or two, and she helps you find something, helps you get the computer on, whatever. Okay, you meet her at Walmart. What happens?
Usually greet her, but very, very small talk, if any talk at all.
Right. Very quick greeting.
They try to ignore her
Why would that be?
because you don't feel comfortable enough starting up a conversation. You don't know if she remembers you. I mean, it depends, I guess, on the level of friendship, or you don't know what to talk about. You're afraid she might be uncomfortable talking to you.
Yeah. See, so it's a very compartmentalized relationships. In fact, we might even have trouble recognizing somebody in a different place because we're not used to seeing them outside of that one context. It's like, this person looks really familiar. Where do I know them at? You know. If you do recognize them as somebody you've had a lot of conversation with, and you do strike up this brief conversation at Walmart, it will be brief for the most part. It won't really go anywhere. And it's like each one will have this consciousness that this conversation doesn't have anywhere to go. You know, and there's this sense that we need to go on. You know, we need to part and go about our business. Okay. Does that sound strange to anybody? Or does that sound the way it is?
It sounds like the way it is, but I don't necessarily think that it's the way it should be.
Many people, even who attend church together, for many of them, that's another compartment. That's the way it is. They don't see each other anywhere else. Now, if they meet each other at Walmart, there'll be a little bit more warmth there. This is brother so-and-so we go to church with, and they may stop and talk a little longer. There won't be a problem there. But even at that, for the most part, even church relationships are really compartmentalized. That is not a good thing, especially for the church thing. And so friends who spend time together in a variety of activities are rare. Okay? Because you normally have friends with whom you do certain things. You're in class together, you study together, you work together, whatever. But that's all you do with that friend. And it doesn't cross. The friends that you get together with in a variety of settings are really rare. And that's why somebody who comes from another country where their friends, or another culture, their friends were people they spend time with all the time and there could never be too much, they come here and they say nobody has friends. It doesn't, because friendships are not that way. And they look for friends who will fill those roles like they had in the place where they came from, and they don't find them, and they don't know what's going on. They don't understand what's going on many times. Okay? Because they left their friends back home and they come and they assume that there will be new friends like that. Okay? But Americans, in fact, this last thing on this that I had down here, an American will be concerned if it seems that a new friend is going to expect a lot of time and commitment and not be easily compartmentalized. Okay? So they made a new friend. Okay, let's see. Here is an American, typical American, at a college, and they meet somebody and make friends with them. At class, say. They're sitting in class and on break while they're drinking coffee, they start talking, and wow, this person's kind of interesting, and they form up this little friendship. Maybe one borrows a book from the other or whatever. Well, then the other one one of them calls the other one and says, hey, you want to go down wherever and play game ping pong or whatever, some kind of leisure activity. Okay? The thought that is going to be in the other person's mind is they're going to have to weigh, they're going to evaluate whether they really want the friendship to progress to that or not. If they're not really sure, then they start getting a little worried. Is this friend going to take up too much time? Because for Americans, that's another thing they talk about today. We talked about it some last. Time is a limited resource. Time is not an unlimited resource, okay? And people in many cultures, time is going to keep coming forever, so time is not a limited resource. It's like the air you breathe, there'll always be more time. For most Americans, time is not that way. It's a limited resource. You don't have much of it. And so you're a little worried if it looks like a friend is not going to fit into a compartment. They show up at your dorm room and come in and sit down and you're studying and they talk. And you wonder, how long is she going to be in here? Okay? They start getting worried. The compartments have been broken. You know, they broke out of their compartment. You know? Now, this kind of stuff, you Americans, this sounds familiar, right? Even though you probably never heard it put that way. And maybe it looks kind of bad when you really look at it that way. It's like, man, are we really like that? That's not very good, is it? That's not very nice. Foreign students maybe can remember bumping into this a little bit and experiencing this and trying to figure out what is it that's happening here. Okay? Have you observed this? Anybody? Give me some feedback on this.
I've observed that in a way that that is true about us Americans, is that we consciously have this time management type thing, and we have to get this done and everything, and we don't think we have that much time for our friends. But I also think that as we grow older, that's also decreasing, like, of how well we can attain a friendship, a true friendship. Because we get so busy with our lives, we have our families to take care of, we have, you know, other things, and but I think when you're younger, like children-wise, they don't really think about that, and so of course you're gonna have more closer friends when you're a child, but also it kind of depends on if you've traveled so much, and then you're just kind of worried, well, if I make friends, then I'm not gonna be able to keep them, you know, with me. So it kind of can vary in that way of time, I guess.
Okay.
I would agree that we compartmentalize a lot, but I think we also do have close friends. Like, I know I've always had at least one really close friend, but it doesn't usually go much further than that. Like, I have a lot of friends, and a lot of them are good friends, but it doesn't seem like I have a big base of close friends. And maybe that's different too in other cultures.
Well, other cultures would not tend to have a lot of close friends that they spend a lot of time with, because you can't. You can't have very many close friends that you spend a lot of time with because you just don't have enough time. So friendships tend to be not as broad. I mean, not as many people in that circle, but the ones who are in it are important to you. And so you spend a lot of time with that group of friends. And that's where a lot of foreigners see Americans as being fake and artificial in their friendliness, because they act like they want to be your friend. They're really friendly and nice, and they act like that it would be perfectly fine, and you get the impression it'd be perfectly fine to go by their dorm room and sit for 3 hours. But then when you get there, you realize, no, they didn't really want that. They didn't really welcome that. And so, well, were they to want to be my friend or not? You know? Well, yeah, but just there. Okay? Within limit. And so a lot of foreigners get frustrated because it seems like Americans are really fake in their friendliness. Showing interest, smiling and friendly, when they're really not interested in becoming your friend. Yes?
It's interesting to talk about this in regards to Americans. And when I was in China, I found that it was hard to make any close friends there. It seemed like it was worse there. I don't know what the reasoning was behind that with them. I don't know if they compartmentalized our friendship as we we were English teachers, so we became friends at school and not as much in the other day-to-day activities. But I found myself wanting to be invited to go out shopping with some of the other teachers or do things together, but unless we were at school, they didn't do a whole lot with us. And there was one day that the principal was gone. She was just a little bit older than us. And I asked one of the other teachers, or the secretaries, where the principal was. And she's like, why do you need to know? Like, it's none of your business. She's like, you foreigners ask all these questions. And it's none of your business. And I was thinking, well, she's the principal, and she's gone for half the day. I care about what's going on in her life and what's going on at the school. And it was just really interesting.
Yeah. Okay.
I also think it depends on the culture of how much we value our relationships. Because, of course, in many other cultures, they do value friendship. They do value families. You know, like we were saying earlier about America and how we don't really put value on our family relationship-wise. And I think that has a lot to do with it, too. Is how much value we put on it. And, of course, it depends on the person. But, yeah, just in general.
Another thing I've run into is not just about context, but different places or locations, is also about different levels. I've seen between roommates, they're very close, and so they're very close friends on more personal stuff. But on the more informal, like playing games in the comments or whatever, they hardly ever do it. But when it comes to personal matters and accountability, that kind of thing, they're very close. But yet it feels weird to them because like I never hang out with this other person, so I don't feel like they're close friends. But in reality, they're probably a deeper friend than they are close.
So it's almost another kind of compartment.
Yeah.
Even though it's a deep one.
Yeah.
It doesn't cross other. The friendship doesn't cross.
Like you won't necessarily play a card game with your accountability partner, even
Right.
though you share your heart and your prayer with them. But it's just interesting to see that.
Yeah. Now, when Americans go to other countries, they face this same difference because, again, they expect to compartmentalize. They expect to have a house and especially a room that is only theirs. Okay? But what happens is the people they make friends with assume that they are welcome in the house at any time. Whatever. In many cultures, there are some cultures where they will come to your house at any time. They come in. They expect to roam around. They expect to go into any room and be there at any amount because they're your friend. And they assume that if you're friends, that it's open and your time is theirs. Americans are thinking, man, it's late. This is out of the bounds of the compartment that I had. They're not thinking of it that way, but they're expecting it to be narrow. When do we close? How late is too late for me to have to enter the door and let somebody in to talk? Yes, Mr. Rose.
With the whole friendship thing, but now we're compartmentalized thing. Could it be just the way Americans define friendship and other cultures define friendship to be different? Because I don't think if I went to the library and I met this librarian every day and I talk to them and I say hi and have a chit chat, I would call them my friend.
Okay.
Like, I would say hi and be polite, but I don't think you call people your friends. Like, could it be just a different kind of definition of friendship with different cultures that Americans have?
Yeah, and that would, of course, probably not be considered a deep friend. Many people wouldn't necessarily call her a friend in that situation. Do you agree that Americans tend to do this compartmentalizing? Is that different from what you're used to? No? Is it pretty similar to what you're used to?
Yeah, like, if you leave it, I don't know, maybe it's just because where I come from, like, I don't even know my neighbors, so I don't know, maybe with some people it's different, but it's hard to be friends with someone who you don't share a common interest. Like, if you meet them once in a while, so, I don't know, maybe, yeah, I don't know about that.
You live in the city? You come from a city? People are a lot less likely to know their neighbors who live in the city than in the rural area. So describe what a friendship, like if you have a group of friends back home, describe what kind of time they spend together.
I wouldn't say the amount of time. I would say the kind of information you share, the experience you had, and so it will come with that. Like you had experiences, you shared your ups and downs, and that is like friendship. But because some people you go out with, hang out with, but they're not really your friends. I don't know. It's just different.
Right, I understand. So these people that you would call friends, would you be doing a variety of things, like some kinds of leisure activities for fun?
Yeah.
Uh,
Sometimes. Mm-hmm.
Possibly any day of the week you would be together?
Yeah, I guess so. Sometimes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And those friends do exist, friends like that, for Americans, but there aren't very many of them. You don't have very many friends like that, right? Okay. Yes.
This is a thought on it. I've noticed a lot about like, when I make friendships or when people make friendships, it's all based on trust. Like, if I believe I can trust somebody, then I'll let them in closer, and so that lets the relationship grow deeper. But if I have a sense that they're going to go tell everything that I tell them, I'm going to keep them right here, and just without trying, I'm going to keep them right there, and I'm not going to let the relationship go any further. So I think trust, and once you break trust, your friendship will drown, and so it's hard to keep a reputation of keeping trust. Like, I don't know, like our culture is so based on, can I trust you? Can you handle what I have to say? Do you know, personalized stuff? So trust is a huge, at least to me and to people I've noticed, because I'm not going to just walk up to Joe Blow and be like, oh, hey, you know, about my life. But,
Right. It's only a few, and it takes time. You have to know somebody a while before you come to that trust. Americans would probably tend to be a little different. There's a similarity there, obviously, but there are a lot of cultures that tend to share a lot more about their feelings and their inner life and so on with their friends than what we do.
I'm just gonna say, the amount of time I spend with someone doesn't really, like, I might spend all my time with you, but that doesn't mean I'm gonna share a bunch of stuff with you. Like, I have a really good friend at home, and if I have something really going on, then I'll more than likely call her up. Or like my brother, I share a lot with my brother. So if something's really bothering me, something's really gonna affect me, then I'll more than likely go to one of them than to somebody that I might spend all my time with. I'll just be superficial more like with them, be like, oh yeah, I'm great, when I'm really not great. But I only have certain people, but I don't have to talk to them every day. We might go a month without talking, but if I need her, she's right there.
Yeah.
That's how my friends are.
There's a lot of aspects to this. The depth of a friendship is not measured just in the amount of time you spend together. Then there are friendships that go back a long time that you've had for a long time, and you have that depth of trust with them. And those friendships are very valuable. You don't have very many of those in a lifetime, really, of people that you would share almost everything with. So those are very valuable. If you've got a few friends like that, then count yourself blessed, because not very many of those come.